Hello, welcome to the Heroine's Journey panel. I'm so glad you guys could all come. I'm Elizabeth Whitton, and I'll be moderating this panel. Now, before I move on to introducing the panel members, I just wanted to do a little bit of a brief intro to our topic. So, Heather, are you going to give me my hostess? I have my hostess status? Awesome. All right, I'm going to show you a couple of graphics. All right, here we go. This is called the Hero's Journey, and this is a representation that was introduced first by Joseph Campbell a long time ago. You might be familiar with it, or you might not be, but it doesn't really matter because you will intuitively know its stages, because the hero's journey is the template upon which many of the stories we read and watch on TV and film are. So the hero's journey, it's basically a circle. That's the usual way you see it displayed. There's about, I think it's what, 17 steps? And like I said before, you might not know those steps, but you're going to intuitively know them because, as I said before, it's very a common template used in our modern culture. That's not the case for the heroine's journey. Maureen Murdoch, a psychologist, introduced the heroine's journey as an alternative to the hero's journey because she felt it didn't adequately address the spiritual journey of women. It's not the only template for the woman's journey or for the heroine's journey. There are a lot of others. One is based on a labyrinth, and you can look those up, on the internet. But it's going to be useful for us to discuss the points we want to bring up. So that's where we're going to start. There's going to be some comparisons between the hero's journey and the heroine's journey. But we're going to probably focus mostly on the heroine's journey and her experience because, there's been so much done with the hero's journey. This panel is going to be using terms like woman and man and feminine and masculine. And this is just to facilitate the discussion and make it easy, to discuss these things we're going to be talking about. But it isn't meant to exclude others who identify as non-standard genders. I'm sure as a panel, we would have loved to just delve into that topic as well, but we really don't have that much time. So we've had to narrow our scope to about a few questions. And so we're not going to be discussing a non-binary character's journey in this panel. I'm hoping next year that we will have a panel that will do that, because I think that would be a fantastic panel. But right now, that's not where we're going to go. So, okay, let's move on to introductions. Again, I'm Elizabeth Whitton. I write speculative fiction, YA and adult. 2018, I won the Aurora Award for my YA story, Houses of the Old Flat. I'm going to be launching the second book in that series in late fall, and that was called The Gold Flame of Seneca. And then finally, I have a short story called The Grass Gods. It's going to be appearing in a Prairie Gothic anthology. I'm just mentioning that because a lot of local writers here are going to be in that story, and they're brilliant writers. And that's going to be a really, really fun book. You might want to just keep your eye out open for that one. They're going to be releasing it in October. So I'm going to pass the baton on to Celeste. You go next.
Oh, hi everyone. I'm Celeste Peters. I also write speculative fiction. I have stories in the various anthologies and magazines behind me here. I'm working on a novel, like I think most of the people in the audience. Yeah, that's me.
And Liz, our birthday girl.
Yes, well, I write strictly, I'm Liz Westbrook-Trenholm. I strictly write short fiction. I'm probably the only writer in the world who isn't trying to write a novel. But I do write novels in short story form, I'm told. I've been published in a number of, anthologies and magazines, and most recently, I guess, in the Amazing Stories accomplishment last year. The one that was nominated for an Aurora this year, and congratulations to Amal for getting this prize for that. I've got an Aurora for an earlier story that was published a couple of years ago in one of Laxa Media's wonderful anthologies. And my husband and I have a joint story coming up in the next one. So it's going to be quite interesting. My husband, Hayden Bundor, is a publisher of and I am with him, a publisher of Bundor and the Bundoran Press, public publisher, which is going into retirement, is closing as of October 30th. Yeah, but we have had a wonderful run and introduced some fabulous writers who are now well published, and many of them, their first stories were with us. So we're rather chuffed about that. I think that covers it. I live in Ottawa. I'm on a different time zone. When all of you start to party tonight, I'll be in bed.
Okay, Jayne. Do we have a visual of Jayne? All right. Well, when Jayne comes back, we'll let her introduce herself. But while we wait for that to happen, why don't we just start with our first question? So I'll let Celeste lead this. What are some of the elements that make the heroine story different than the hero story? Or I was going to have Jayne do that one, wasn't I? I'm going to give you a different one. What are the advantages of exploring the heroine story for readers and writers?
I think you need to know which journey your character is on, especially for people who are pantsers, who start off, writing and things are getting exciting, and they get to a certain point in their book and suddenly they realize they have no clue how it's going to end. If you know which journey your character is on, whether it's the hero's journey or the heroine's journey, it will help you develop that ending in a much more satisfying way if you stay on the same journey you started out on.
Yeah. Also, so we'll be going deeper into this in our discussion, but there's a lot of advantages writing from the heroine's story point of view, and it's unfortunate Jayne isn't ready yet because she was going to set this all up so this would fit a little bit better. But there's a lot of themes in the heroine's story that can be really add nuance and texture to your work, like themes of oppression, right? Themes of self-actualization. They go on, and they are, I think it's more nuanced. The heroine story is more nuanced because it's a very internal kind of story. And so those internal things that you have to do, like, the heroine, for instance, often her greatest sort of struggles are in her home. That's not the safe place, where as the hero, he leaves his safe home and goes off, and faces external challenges. So these things can be a little bit more nuanced and bring more nuance to your stories as you write them too. And Jayne is here. How are you? Can you hear us?
Good, thank you. A little bit of technical problems, but I think
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, why don't you just introduce yourself and things you're working on, and then we're going to move you to a question.
All right. Jumped me right into the deep end. Thank you. Yes, so my name is Jayne Barnard. As that name, I wrote the Maddie Hatter Adventures, which are all about women getting out of their safe space and going off and having adventures, taking risks. But because it was a series, she didn't get to just come home at the end, so that arc was still out there. And now under J.E. Barnard, I write the Falls Mysteries, also about women, but this time they're more mature women and they're rebuilding their lives after catastrophe. So those are contemporary crime stories, but the hero's journey is right in there all the way through. Heroine's journey is right there all the way through. And I think I was writing it before I knew that there was one.
It was intuitive. That's really amazing. I think a lot of your heroines in your stories are marching along that heroine journey. And especially in your fall series, I've been privileged to read a few of those books. So yeah. I think, they're great places to go if you want to see, that internal dynamic that the heroines have to face. Okay, Jayne, let's ask you a question. What are the elements that make a heroine story different from the hero story?
Oh, I think the very first one that comes to mind is it's generally celebrated when the hero goes off to do things, and I apologize if I'm repeating due to technical difficulties, I missed a couple seconds. But for the heroine, it is much more difficult to untangle. Heroines have responsibilities, and we are raised from childhood, from early childhood, to look out for others, to do our jobs, to sit back, be quiet, not make waves. And if young girls step outside that mold, we're generally pulled back in by society and our teachers and our parents. And for us to leave all of that to go on a quest for something bigger, there has to be a huge inciting incident.
Yeah.
So I think while it is okay for heroes to go, it is not okay for heroines to go. And heroines go with the knowledge somewhere in their psyche that they may not be welcomed home again if they break societal norms.
Wow. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, and that is certainly the cycle that was demonstrated by, that was developed by Maureen Murdoch, and it's a handy story prompt, and helps us keep our thoughts organized. But of course, as soon as there's a rule, the first thing I want to do is break it, and so if somebody tells my heroine to stay home, they're going to, fail in that attempt. But it is a nice dichotomy, a push. It is a source of excellent conflict. Also, I think also that when Murdoch wrote that response to Campbell, it was of an era. I remember I found this quote that was absolutely incredible when it said, she was doing this model, and she developed the heroine's journey based on her work with women in therapy and showed it to him in 1983, which is a pretty pivotal date. I was having kids then. Campbell reportedly said, "Women don't need to make the journey. In the whole mythological journey, the woman is there. All she has to do is realize that she's the place that people are trying to get to."
Yeah.
He's dead. He died in 1987.
Did you get that from a book? Do you know what book is that?
That I got off a website, and it's actually the very one that shows Maureen Murdoch's cycle. The thing is that I think we've developed a lot in our attitudes towards the heroine's journey. It's evolved just as in that time, women were shrill if they were feminist. It was just evolving. Feminism was having a new rise. And as for gender variation, pangender was not anywhere on anybody's horizon in 1983. So we are working from a model that has evolved, but it's still a good, it's a good starting place.
I'm getting several questions actually in the chat, and they're asking, is this, as Jayne introduced it, leaving the home, you're almost considered as a traitor, as absconding from your responsibilities as a mother. And do you think that's still true today? Is that still relevant? I actually think it is, to tell you the truth. Like, I know women go work and women have careers and everything, but still the responsibility for the most part lands on your shoulders. It doesn't, that's what I find, but maybe I'm out of touch.
I could see Celeste has.
Let's go, girl.
Here, I've looked at all these models you have been looking at over the last year, and I say balderdash to all of them. I think the heroine's journey is the journey that only a female can take, and that is based on childbirth. And there's a whole emotional arc. I'm not saying every story about a heroine includes childbirth, but it's the emotional arc of childbirth that underpins the heroine's journey. And just right off the bat, I want to say there is an amazing movie called The Aeronauts with Eddie Redmayne and Felicity Jones in it. That's a perfect example of the heroine I'm talking about, where the main thing is when she comes into the story, she has no choice. The first element of I think I've got 7 here, is that call to adventure is becoming a woman, having your first period. That happens very early on. It's an innate quality of being a woman. So someone like Liz's Addie, her innate ability is in her genetics. She has no choice about this. She's there. She's ready for the adventure, whether she wants to be or not. And then somewhere along the line, you become, as a woman, woman, you can become pregnant. There, you're off on the journey. Again, whether you want to be or not, there are a lot of ways to approach that point. And then you've got the challenge. And I just like to say, in opposition to the hero's journey, that first initial step there, you have no, it's unlike. Whereas the becoming pregnant part, the launching on the journey, that is very much usually a choice a woman gets to make, whether she enters it at that point. And then you have the challenges along the way, where you have morning sickness, all of that kind of thing that's represented. But unlike the hero's journey, the female always has a second, at least one other life under her wing that she's got to keep in mind while she's going through the ultimate battle. She goes into labor, and then that visit to death where you're right there at the crisis point where you have to give it over to, okay, I might lose my life doing this, but I'm going for it, and I have to keep that other person in mind at the same time. And then, you get to the point where you've got the baby, you've got your boon, and you've got new confidence knowing that you can survive anything, you can do anything. But now you're reintegrating with society, and what happens is you get a pat on the head, job well done, and all the attention moves to the object you've been protecting. And you're just fine with that. And that's what I see as the underlying arc of the heroine's journey.
And I'm just going to interject here, and then we'll let Jayne go. But in reference to that added character we were talking about, her focus was protecting her family, standing between danger and her little sister, or standing between danger. And I feel that this is a very common theme with a lot of women heroines. Even the kick butt women heroines. They're in the arena to put themselves before between the danger and the ones they love. So I don't even think you have to have the childbirth experience. It's that maternalness to protect.
Right.
That can also be that kind of element. So yeah, excellent points, Celeste. Wow. So you had something to say, Jayne?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on Celeste's point and say, yes, the other half, if you will, of the having to leave home is you may not even want to, because you may still have hostages to fortune sitting there that you have to leave unprotected to go and do this bigger thing. Mm-hmm. And no matter how carefully you build in protections for them, you are not there. And I think that's a really fundamental dichotomy for a woman, especially whether she has a natural child or just people or dogs even that she's really attached to. She has to make the emotional decision to leave that and trust that it will be okay. And that too is a huge part of the heroine's journey, I think, is making the emotional decision to leave behind all that she's been protecting and trust that it will be okay until she gets back.
Did you want to add to that, Liz?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about the guilt she'll feel throughout the journey. And do men feel guilty? I don't know if heroes feel guilty, but heroines, if they're genuine characters, will definitely feel anxious or guilty about what they're leaving behind. Though I also often examine women who've been through this whole cycle a time or two and may well be weary, angry, disappointed, frustrated, and not really willing to re-engage in the battle and find themselves via some instigating circumstance forced to. And you'll see a lot of older women in my stories that are embittered and cranky and are finding themselves having to engage because there is no choice. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to deal with. Yeah.
You know, if you look at that heroin cycle, the Maureen's cycle that she put together that you totally don't go for, Alyssa. There's like this, there's this dichotomy, right? This duality. At first, the first step is, and I'm bringing it about the Crohn's, is that she kind of abandons her femininity, abandons the mother is, I think, what they go. And then tries, you know, and tries to assume more of the masculine characteristics. And do you think that's valid still, or no?
That's her trying to go on the hero's journey, which is just fine.
True.
But it's not the heroine's journey.
Yeah, but and that leads to my next question. Because, like, why is it that you think that the heroine's journey has not received the same sort of profile that the hero's journey is? Why is it like overlooked over, you know, the femininity, the power of the maternal? Why are those things overlooked in our current sort of culture and such? Why would you think that? Anyone want to go first?
I think it's because we live in a patriarchal society. If we lived in a matriarchal society, it might be different.
Those things would be valued.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to back right up to the dichotomy between masculine and feminine. I've spent a lifetime exploring that fictionally and personally, and I don't know how in this day of pangender and the absolute disapproval of the binary model for sexuality, apart from dimorphism, where men are 10% larger than women, the differences are minimal. And I'm asking me, I don't even know what we mean when we say masculine or feminine. I don't think there are any hard and set definitions. I don't know unless we equate, and as soon as we equate caring with being a woman, that seems a little unfair to all the caring men out there. You know?
Now they can go on the heroine's journey.
Yeah. Is it a false dichotomy? Is male, feminine, masculine a bit of a cheat, a bit of a false dichotomy?
No, they're just two out of many different journeys. I think
it isn't power versus powerlessness. It isn't control versus lack of control. That's kind of more how I'd see it. And gender often, women often find themselves as the powerless one, the oppressed one. But it can, it can be reversed too. I just throw it in there. Now let's have fun.
All right, Jayne, you're the fun girl. Go, girl.
Jayne's been really quiet.
Because after your response, Jayne, if you wanted to, and I'm going to just go through the chat. Because, oh my goodness, there's some really great comments.
Oh my goodness, it's already half past. Oh.
Yeah, it's flying by. We don't. Yeah. We thought going into this, some of us have been discussing this off and on for a year in the middle of the night on Facebook and chat. What about this angle? What about that angle? We're not going to get through all of it today. There's this is a really big subject area. But I want to pick up on Liz's point about, is there a dichotomy? And I don't think there is. I think we're dealing with, Carl Jung talked about the masculine, feminine, the anima, animus, the shadow side of your own personality. Well, I think we all exist on that spectrum, and it's not just one spectrum. We all exist with more physical or less physicality. We all exist with more nurturing or less nurturing. We all exist with more stereotypically masculine traits or more feminine traits, but we all exist on all of these spectrums simultaneously. And so I don't know that there is a dichotomy to be had anymore. But I just want to bring up one other point, and maybe this is going to derail you, Liz. Gee, I'm sorry.
We told you we'd subvert the panel.
Yes, we did. But I'm looking
so
over
unruly.
We're all heroes. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to bring this up with reference to Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, because everybody knows the original movie. And he has the father moment, which is a classic hero's journey moment. But if you look at the models of the Murdoch model and the, what's her name? I knew it 2 minutes ago. Victoria Schmidt model.
Right. Yeah.
There is no corresponding meet up with the mother moment there. Now, why is that? If part of a man's journey is he has to confront his father, and George W. Bush famously got drunk and punched his father when he was about 30. Does the woman not have to meet her mother?
Why does the woman's journey have to be in reference to the man's journey?
Well, that's what I'm wondering. This is a significant difference. Mm-hmm. And is that model flawed? Do we meet our own mothers on our journey at any point?
We become our own mothers.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway.
Oh, terrifying.
I, for one, did see I saw a lot of images, a lot of these cycles, and one of them did talk about abandoning what was identified as the mother mother
Energy.
role,
Yeah.
mother energy,
Or
but the
archetype.
mother,
Yeah.
and then reintegrating with that after finding independence and a new world, and that is how I would say symbolically again how the female's journey is similar in that she abandons her mother's values and then returns and reconciles in some way with those values, even if she may not come to agree with them entirely. So I think certainly I tend to, in my own fiction, I love to examine the mother-daughter relationship, and it's often that the daughter is breaking free and the mother is struggling to understand what's going on and so forth.
I always feel like they take away the power from the crone. You know, you watch modern TV or modern shows.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the older woman, she stays at home. In some cultures, the older woman is the wise woman, is the person everyone goes to for advice. I feel like in our culture, and that's where I still feel that it's there in our culture, that the crone, you know, is an invisible person, and yet that's the person, that's the vessel of all the experience of the maiden and of the mother. It's all a well right there, and yet it's discounted, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I feel there's still a dichotomy for me. That's where I feel it is.
I love the anti-hero effect, the anti-heroine in that is the true heroine in Maleficent. I mentioned this to you.
Oh, this is good. Okay, we're going to let you do your Maleficent because it's brilliant. Then I got to go to some of these questions because they're really good.
Yes, we do. It's just that Maleficent is an anti-heroine. I mean, she's the evil fairy in Sleeping Beauty, in this retelling of Sleeping Beauty, but she has her power torn physically from her back by a treacherous lover to use for his own advancement. Is that not a metaphor for the glass ceiling? And
oh yeah.
and then what she discovers is she's going to punish not the perpetrator, but the offspring, that she finds her focus in protecting the offspring. We've been talking about that.
Oh,
and
yes.
eventually discovering how love is truly expressed, what true love is. Yeah. And I love that movie.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Maleficent didn't actually birth, you know, Aurora.
No.
But she took on that role, right? So we're never saying you have to have children to understand that, but it is, you know, it's definitely an archetype. Okay, I'm going to go into the questions before we have to go. People are talking about this template that I couldn't seem to get online. Sorry about that. The template, it's usually it's in a diagram of a circle. You just look up Hero's Journey, you'll find it on the internet, all sorts of versions of it. Same with the heroines. It's just a graphic to try to understand it, just to kind of see it in one place. It could be represented linearly. It could be represented. The one I love that I didn't even show or talk about is the Labyrinth. That's really a fascinating one. You might want to look that one up too. So you can just go on the internet, see those templates. I'm really sorry it didn't show up. Okay, let's talk about it. All right, we answered the true one. Does anyone, okay, we talked about the book. Sorry about this, guys. All right. The cost of failure is higher for women, but the success generations between the genders, success expectations between the genders are the same. That was actually more a comment than a question, but that was a very good comment, I thought. You know, again, that sort of works into the dichotomy thing. How much of your own personality shines through your heroine, or did you try to create an opposite of yourself? So through our heroines that we write, do we try to experience that hero's journey, or do we try to give them the heroine's journey? What would you say? Jayne, you've written a lot of heroines.
Oh, yeah. I think there's definitely some wish fulfillment there. Some of my heroines are really kick-ass and physically fit and active, and anybody who knows me knows that I've been disabled for 30 years now, and kick-ass is not the word anybody would use to describe me.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know. I've seen you go up the street in your scooter. Yeah, cruising. I've seen it. Yeah.
Okay, so yes. No, I think there are pieces of me in all of my heroines, but they are not me. And I am not them. And I think the closest one for me is the character of Jan in the Falls Mysteries, because she has, by design, the same illness I do. And because I wrote Jan to speak to the women who are like me, who essentially were separated from the outside world and from the possibility of going on any external journeys. All of her journey has to be interior, and she speaks to the 20 million people who have my illness, 75% of whom will never hold a job again, 25% of whom will never leave a darkened bedroom again.
Yeah.
And I think she's really the most heroic of my characters, just because she gets up and keeps trying every day to find something that will bring her back out of that darkened space.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, Jeff Hughes, I just read what you wrote.
Did Celeste want to answer that?
Sorry.
I wanted to hear what Celeste wants to
No, I'll give you another one.
Yeah,
I just want to say, Jeff Hughes out there, that's way too smart for me to handle. We should talk. We should probably get you on a panel. So go look in the chat, guys. He wrote something really amazing. So, but I can't really answer that question. Yeah, I'm agreeing with what Celeste said, but I think conflating motherhood with womanhood is excluding women who don't want to have children or who cannot. I think we kind of addressed that, do we not, in our questions?
Yeah, it's an emotional journey. It's
Yeah.
It's
It's not a literal journey.
physical journey.
Yeah, it's not the literalness. It's so I hope that helps you, Caroline. All right, yeah, and there were several agreements to that. Okay. All right. Okay, so yeah, the children thing was a big deal here. All right, to clarify, you don't have to have children to experience the women's journey.
No,
But
my daughter didn't.
As a metaphor
no.
to explain the emotional impact. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
You may end up with them sometimes from somebody else.
That too. And my daughter, either of my daughters have children, but gaining something to care about can be an essential part of a woman's journey. My daughter, at one of her lowest points, rescued a dog, and the dog saved her, gave her something to get up and go for a walk with. And I've heard this experience from a lot of people who have depression. The structure of needing to care for something helps them rebuild.
Oh, right.
And that's a journey.
That is a journey.
That also brings up something that I think we've amongst ourselves talked about that in common is the compassion that heroine brings to a journey. And that's a good example there.
Yeah. Yes, I think some people are talking here about power, the power dynamic, and they're quite interested in that. Do we want to check further about that? Yeah, because Liz was saying, maybe we're using the wrong terms. Maybe it's not feminine and masculine. Maybe it's not woman and man. Maybe it's power and powerless.
Well, Liz, you said that you were really keen on the Labyrinth model. Now, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
attendees aren't seeing that, but I looked at that and I thought that is a power structure. That applies not just to the heroine, but to any minority group you can think of.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a question here that's, and I want to address it. And it's from Barb Krieger. Hi, Barb. I can see a future where empathy and compassion are gendered emotions. I think that's
I'm
kind of
writing one.
go for it, Liz.
Just that I've just submitted a story for rejection, as I always say. And that is one way of exploring gender roles, is to completely flip them. And I don't know if I'm being valid, but the person who is caring and wants to negotiate is the male in a couple. Mm-hmm. And the person who decides to be the next level of law officer is more action oriented in her approach, and sometimes still they reach an understanding. She wants to take an action that will save a life when maybe attempting to negotiate further in a hostage situation will fail. We were asked to write stories about alternate policing. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, she still buys into her partner's philosophy and has internalized it in terms of the value of human life and the value of not taking life at all. But she finds technological means for doing that, as opposed to talking and some clever psychological discussion with the hostage taker that hopefully keeps it light enough for a commercial story, but does get into a little bit into other ways of doing things. I won't go on about my writing. You can look.
I have an opinion about empathy and compassion being gendered issues. I don't think they're gendered issues. I think they're valued differently because of their gender. For instance, you have a doctor who's compassionate and empathetic, which is required in his profession, and he is marvelous and respected. And a woman is passionate and empathetic, and that's almost discounted. It's just because she's a woman, and if she even shows it, it can almost be perceived as weakness. Now, maybe again, that's an old-fashioned or a passé view, but I still think it lingers in our society. So yeah, that's what I would kind of put out there. So how are we doing for time? I've got to look at my clock.
Yeah,
we have 6 minutes left. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Can I just add something about powerlessness or the power dynamic?
Okay.
And we haven't really gone into this because if you look at our faces, you can tell we are all white women. But I do want to raise at least the issue that heroines don't all start from the same place. If you are disabled, if you are poor, if you are a woman of color, you are, and if you are an Indigenous woman in Canada, you are heavily financially at risk, even more so than a woman who is not Indigenous, simply because of the ownership structure of your own home. And so I can't speak to any of those other issues, but I do want us to be aware that where the heroine starts from is vastly different in our society based on all of these other factors.
And when we're talking and saying, okay, well, we're not experiencing that anymore as women, because our society has developed, those women are experiencing it. They're experiencing all those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, other abled people, the range of genders, and anybody who is racialized experiences that, regardless of gender, regardless of whether they have an innie or an outie. And, they, it's true that we are very privileged, and I feel we're pretty privileged. And yet we've all had our traumas. We know that, haven't we? But those traumas help inform our writing, and they help us understand ourselves, but also understand help us reach an empathy and an understanding with people in conditions and situations that are different from our own. And I use fiction that way to come to an understanding of how somebody else might be experiencing a situation.
I want to end our conversation on this because I think it speaks to the end of the heroine cycle, which makes it so beautiful and powerful and worthy of increased elevation in our society and storytelling and films. It says, this is from, let's see, that was in my question thing. All right. Did it disappear? It disappeared. Can a man go on the heroine's journey?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I feel it's like the man's journey is, the heroine's journey is in the end becoming a person in charge of their own life.
Right.
You know, and the man, the hero's journey, he comes back probably to accolades, bringing the elixir, the treasure, and, you know, an elevated status in society. The woman comes back, or on the heroine's journey, she comes back and she's become herself, her true authentic self, and powerful in that way. And that's a journey that can be shared by transgender, by men, by, you know, anyone. I think that's what makes the heroine's journey so powerful, the integration and the becoming of who you really are.
And the acceptance of self, your own acceptance.
Yeah. And that's a true power. Okay, shall we end this? Each of you, why don't you tell us where we can be found? And we'll say goodbye.
And I did actually put everyone's website into the chat for all the attendees to see. And Liz, I put the link to the Laxa Media for you, and did say that everyone is also on Facebook.
Okay, well, you did our work for us. I want to thank the audience for all the wonderful comments and coming and listening. No discussion, you know, and it was there's controversial parts of our discussion, and instead of, you know, and there was, you know, places you disagreed, but you stuck with it, asked the questions. We talked about it more, and that's just the best panel ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Liz G.
and I want to thank Heather. She's been the Zoom host for all of my panels. She's just been brilliant and just like as steady as a rock. So thank you so much. And it's all volunteer. Everything is volunteer. Nobody gets paid.
This has been amazing. You guys need to have this as a 2-hour panel next year.
Okay.
Oh,
we're going to go away and talk.
Fire.
Yeah. We're going to go away and talk about this for the next year anyway.
Oh, yeah. We're not going to stop.
Well, we need to find other panel, you know, get the gender story. You know, there's so many fantastic.
There's so many aspects we can go. And so many smart people out there, too.
And we haven't touched on mentoring and how that's different. That's one of my bugbears. But anyways, I want to say thank you, Heather. And thank you, When Words Collide, for switching this over to a virtual model, because this has been really awesome for me. Way out here on the West Coast, far from all of the people I usually see this weekend. And thank you, friends who have just jumped in on this journey with me and answered my late night questions.
Oh, my pleasure.
Definitely more happy hours for us to discuss.
Yeah, more happy hours.
Okay.
Okay.
So are we done, Heather?
Okay, yes, we are all done. And thank you, everyone. You guys were amazing. Absolutely amazing. Everyone's saying this is their absolute most favorite panel.
Oh, that's awesome. Take care, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you.